I'm going to call Gareth Hughes.
Mr Chair, ngā mihi nui kia koutou kia ora. If anyone listened to that last member, you'd think this bill was apple pie. It was all about choice and freedom and great slogans that the member could come up with. But if anything, it showed how out of touch that member is and the caucus members. Because sure, it's about choice and about freedom, but choice and freedom for a tiny few, drudgery, working on the weekends, less time with your families for the majority of New Zealanders. Now, Mr Chair, to show how out of touch that is, I went through the standing orders, Mr Speaker. Standing Order 48 says this Parliament can't meet on a Sunday. This Parliament needs to close at 11:59 p.m. on Saturday evenings, even under extraordinary urgency. 50 days of the year this House can't sit. Yet it's all about choice and freedom for the retail workers, the people doing the fish and chip shops, all the people who don't have that choice and freedom, who we do know are going to feel pressured into working. So let's not gild the lily with the sloganistic language. Let's say what it is. This is another plank in the government's agenda, which is all about choice and freedom for a small amount of New Zealanders, the employers. It's not about choice and freedom for the rest of them. Mr Chair, for many years this country's had what is called a search for flexibility in workplace relations. I remember reading a very influential book by the noted Bill Such, which described a period in New Zealand's history as the search for security. We've lost that, Mr Chair, a search for security for workers in the name of flexibility in terms of the ability for capital and labour to be ported around the world. And we're seeing a clear government agenda. You see it with the 90 days legislation, you see it with the dodgy deal with Warners, which reduced those workers' rights. There's a litany of legislation that has weakened workers' rights, and you see it in part one of this bill. Because in this bill, what we see is this relentless attack on workers' rights in New Zealand. This is the 10th time in 19 years this Parliament has debated this very issue to try and weaken what is one of only 3.5 days where our shops in New Zealand must be closed. We have 3.5 days, but this group relentlessly, like the Terminator from that film, relentlessly, despite 10 defeats in 19 years, relentlessly ploughs on to try and take one of those 3.5 days. It's like Groundhog Day, where this Parliament's continually voting the same legislation, and they're not going to give up because it's about choice and freedom for some. Now, Mr Speaker, in part one of this legislation, the debate has been kicked to touch or kicked to someone else for responsibility to the council through the bylaws powers. Now, we sat on the select committee. I want to thank the submitters, the chair, Melissa Lee, the other members. It was interesting being on a split-tide committee, Mr Chair, because we couldn't agree to those amendments and the bill's been reported back. The concern we have about delegating responsibility to council through bylaws is that we are going to see inconsistencies, we're going to see more costs, not only for employees who maybe give up family time with one of our only 3.5 days of the year where shops must be closed, but also costs for employers and those associated groups. We're going to see varying rules across the country bring in considerable inconsistencies, and as we have seen with other bylaws challenged through the judicial process, no doubt we're going to see some of these decisions go through the court, adding a second layer of inconsistencies and confusions. So, Mr Chair, this is a bad bill. As a personal vote, I'll be voting against it. I have been one of those low-paid workers where you do feel pressured by your employer to work overtime, to work on the weekends, to drop everything to make sure you can turn up to work, because you don't have the choice and the freedom. You don't have the security of knowing where the next paycheck's going to come from. We've already got these incredibly lax laws. We don't need to be weakening it any further. That's why I'm voting against it.
The Honourable Damien O'Connor.